Mr. Mayor, we've come to the end of what was a very eventful 2023, right? So when you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open. This is a very, very complicated city, and that's why it's the greatest city on the globe.
Welcome, everybody. Left Reckoning 151, Gaza in 2024, elections falling flat, featuring our good friend, Emma Vigeland. My name is David Griscom. I'm broadcasting to y'all live from Austin, Texas. And Matt, beaming in from the greatest city in the world, New York. How you doing, brother?
That I am in the greatest city of New York, where, I'm getting my Dunkin' and I'm looking at a building just expecting a plane to crash right into that thing. Or I'm celebrating the opening of a new bodega where you can buy vape pen oil. So it's very cool, very great, the best city in the world, New York. And the thing about Eric Adams is you can sort of BS. BSing can get you so far. It can make you the mayor of New York.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, it's sort of like the tread is, you're running a little bit on bare tires. And I think that's where Eric Adams is a little bit. So it's like, Eric, is there anything else on your mind than, dealing with business owners, which is his main, constituency that he's concerned about, and being like, oh crap, if a 9/11 happens, I'll get some of that Rudy Giuliani shine. And I'll be able to turn this whole thing around.
That's probably not too far off. Right? Oh, man. Well, we have a really great episode. In just a little bit, we're going to be joined by Emma Vigeland, of course, and we're going to be talking about Gaza and how, in the light of everything that's happening over there, it's sort of hard to get into what's going on in the halls of Congress, 24 elections. But I think before we get to that, Matt, we did our bum steer of the year, which was our episode last week, and we, broke down some of the worst characters of the year. Surprise to no one, it was Joe Biden, but a very close runner-up was John Fetterman. But all right, so we've already looked backwards, so now we can maybe look a little bit forwards. And I just have this quick lesson here from a Eugene Debs piece that I had read recently, and just to set it up really quick, we have to think about what this next year is going to mean for the socialist movement in this country. And I think the biggest question that we all need to be considering is how to build a stronger movement going into this next year. And what's in front of us, it's going to be a fight, as always, for labor and for democracy and against empire. How can we embolden that fight is the big question, right? And everyone says, oh, we got to return to labor. Oh, we got to return to doing mass politics. Oh, we got to grow, all this kind of stuff. Like, really thinking about what that means, I think, is important. And you can do that by looking a little bit backwards at what the Biden administration has meant for the socialist movement, right? There have been significant victories, particularly on the local and state level, as more members of the DSA have been elected on city and state level offices. That has massive promise for the future of this movement. The embeddedness in the labor movement, too, I think has been one of the most exciting and important things. Remember, not only these big wins for the UAW, these big wins for the Teamsters, but I think a narrative that has been missed is how much of a role DSA members have played within that. I'm not trying to say to take credit or anything like that, but there are people who are in positions of influence, power, volunteer positions, who have been out there showing up, participating in these movements. That's real. That's the kind of rootedness in the class struggle that we need. And of course, you couldn't ignore the movements against the slaughter in Gaza, right? These massive street movements and the public education that we've seen, right? So we've seen a lot of successes, right? But this has also been a period of fragmentation and disappointment. The Bernie movement is over in the sense of, being able to coalesce around a grand presidential campaign at that scale and promise. Add in the frustration with many of the symbolic leaders of this movement. We're talking about the Squad. We're talking about influential media figures. The space between supporters of these movements and the leaders itself has been shown. And I think that has created a lot of frustration. And that has led us into a strategic and I think theoretical crisis in our movement And the question is, what lessons should we learn from this period and how to reorient? And there's been this fragmentation, particularly around this question, right? That has a full spectrum, all the way from everything that has happened since 2015 has been a big scam, and people were trying to bamboozle and derail and destroy the movement. That's one camp. To another camp that sort of says, hey, this is the slow march of progress. We should continue doing what we were doing without, I think the truth of that sort of lands somewhere more in the middle. But we're seeing this fragmentation, I think, really expand. And I think going into 2024, the task ahead of us has to be finding a way to revive that spirit of mass politics, doing politics at the national scale, building and growing and articulating for a better future. But also, while we're doing that, not let the immediate goals of our movement allow us to get sloppy about articulating the heart of our critique. That all these fights that we are engaged in will ultimately be unsuccessful until we can weaken the power of the capitalist class and the power of the working class. This brought me to a piece that we'll read a little bit from Eugene Debs, the leader of the Socialist Party, who is the most successful socialist on a general presidential ballot ever. And he wrote this piece around the time when he was running for president, from prison. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, but also just important to note that this was written when Eugene Debs was imprisoned and running for the president of the United States. So the piece is called "Why Are We Not Stronger?" And he says, one reason, and in my opinion, a very real one, why we have not better succeeded in organizing the workers is to be found in our intolerant attitude and ill-tempered spirit towards those of our own class and our own ultimate aim who differ from us. Socialists, communists, anarchists, syndicalists, and wobblies spend more time and energy fighting each other than they do fighting capitalism. Each faction assumes that it is entirely right and that all others are entirely wrong, a very human way of seeing things, but far better calculated to prevent than to promote the effectiveness of organization of the workers. This next one here, there are, of course, and of necessary differences, a necessity of differences between these various groups of organized workers, and these differences are wholesome, result in clear understanding, corresponding unity and solidarity, provided they are met in the right spirit and are made the means of promoting intelligent discussion and acquiring more truth and greater knowledge, thereby building and adding up new strength to the organization. And he goes on to sort of articulate why is it that we can't have debates and conversations and political differences within our own movement without it falling in to bitter infighting. And he says up next, personally, I have equal respect for all who stand foursquare for the working class and for the overthrow of the capitalist system, whether they be socialists, communists, anarchists, or the wobblies. I don't find it necessary to hate and denounce them because their method differs from mine. They may be right. I don't think they are, but I have been mistaken a good many times in the past, and I'm just as apt to be so now as anyone else. This last bit here, I think, really gets to what we're talking about here. So I read this in a communist paper. The first thing we must do is smash the Socialist Party. The writer of that sentiment will find ready allies in Wall Street, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Manufacturers Association, and I'm inclined to think they would pay a round price for the job. More than likely, this comrade, who now calls himself a communist, once belonged to the Socialist Party. Now he wants to smash it. His former comrades are either crooks or fools, and he must now devote his time to smashing their party. He then adds, we know that the Socialist Party is not all that it should be, but instead of deserting it, we are going to do our best to make it a clean, viral, uncompromising revolutionary party of the workers in their worldwide struggle for industrial freedom. I've been reading another communist comrade who sneers with scorn at persons from whom and the places from where he got his first lessons in socialism. They seem to appear utterly contemptible in his eyes since he has scaled the peaks of science and now sees it all with clear eye and an outstanding heart. I confess I cannot understand that feeling. I have not only a deep sense of gratitude, but a sort of reverence for those who gave me the least help or encouragement in finding my way into the socialist movement. And there shall never be in my heart or upon my lips a sneer for one of them, however far the movement may have left them behind. And he ends here by saying something, and I think this is maybe the energy we should take into this next year of struggle. I hope we have a more decent, tolerant, and truly revolutionary spirit in our attitude toward those whom we differ in the movement. and that we may devote our whole time and energy in organizing the workers into one industrial union and one political party for the gigantic struggle which confronts them and which they must win or remain in slavery. The most effective answer to those who sneer at political action is with silence when argument fails. Let them alone and stick to your work of education and organization. And I highly suggest people read the whole piece, "Why We Are Not Stronger" by Eugene Debs. Remember, he wrote this when he was imprisoned by the state for opposing World War One, American involvement in World War One. Eugene Debs was not somebody that you could call a reformist, but he was seeing, I think, very similar things to what we are seeing today. Things that I think are almost worse, because at least then people were members of organizations who might have been fighting with one another. Versus now, where a lot of times when people say, "Oh, I'm a communist or an anarchist or a socialist or whatever," what that means is a kind of personal, spiritual, social identification, rather than as a member of an actual organized and activated a block of working people. But I mean, I think that we've been seeing this for years since we've been on the left, right, Matt? This kind of capacity to wage war stronger with those close to you than our enemies. And I want to throw to you to hear your thoughts on this, but I will say, like, none of this is a call to not have those fights, to not have those debates. Those are really, really important. But it's actually having a capacity and ability to work in a comradely way with one another, so that we can build a strong working class movement and learn from one another when, maybe, a certain perspective or tendencies. Strategy is wrong in a moment, or at least you can articulate yours better with engaging in that. And I think that that's something that's really fallen to the wayside, especially as I think, as Eugene Debs puts really well there, all those people in his time who were members of the Socialist Party, who left the Socialist Party and joined other ones, deciding that, all these things that sort of cultivated me and, I grew with, are now my number one enemies. I think you could see that a lot with people who are very gung-ho for Bernie Sanders 2016, 2020, who are now super based online communists who have no place for anyone else.
Yeah. Well, I also like one thing, like, this goes with my favorite line of thought, which is like to not pathologize or over catastrophize things, because this is things that, if people watched my viewing of the Prairie Trilogy documentary series of the North Dakota Socialists, Henry Martinson talked about this and how they had to come to the defense of the Wobblies, who were getting arrested for actually, doing in-person civil disobedience in Minot, North Dakota. And despite, not agreeing with the Wobblies' approach, which he thought was a little bit alienating in certain respects, like, they felt the need to show solidarity with them because what they're doing was fundamentally for the workers. And I just think, like, these are, I don't think people should get into the line of like, "Oh, the left sucks and look at the left doing this wrong." These are waters that we have to navigate and have always had to be navigated. It's the difficulty of dealing with, different people in like a large scale. But I love Debs' approach, because that's how I feel. I'm a DSA member, but when people like call in and say I'm PSL or I'm a different, like, I take the approach of like any of those. Like, honestly, like, people say, like, and people make things so much about voting. It's like, so I don't want to vote. It's like, well, okay, that's good. Are you a member of like a communist party or something like that? Or is it just online that you express yourself? I think, like, as long as people are doing the work like this, I think that you should be open to, and also extend charity and sympathy and like a little bit of humility towards people.
And I think that's just a sort of it, is coming into this with understand that we have a lot in front of us, a lot that needs to be done, but coming into it with a lot of humility and comradeliness, knowing that we are weak and we need to be doing a lot better than we've been doing. But anyways, hopefully we can bring some of that spirit into 2024. But I think if you're ready, Matt, we could bring in our guest.
Yes, I think. Well, hold on. Let me get this ready. Okay. Yeah, there we go. All right. Welcome. I'd like to welcome,
right at home.
my coworker Emma Vigeland here into the man cave. Here we got. It's a nice day. We got sports memorabilia on the wall. We got a poker table right in the middle
Okay,
for you,
good.
Emma, and also a sushi chef right there. So
I mean, this is infinitely more upscale than the Tim Pool compound, I've got to say. Like, I mean, this almost has some sort of Great Gatsby vibe to it here. I mean, we have someone serving us like that.
Wait, you're saying Tim Pool's thing isn't like this?
I'm saying it's not like this. I'm saying that if I had seen such a setup, and first of all, is this AI generated? Because that's
Yeah, it is,
being
Emma. I asked AI to show me the inside of Tim Pool's compound, and this is what it came up with. And I guess AI is not as powerful as we thought it is. If this is, you're saying this isn't accurate, because in my mind, when I think of Tim Pool like finishing his show and talking about, like LGBT memoirs for young teenagers and getting like red faced about it, I like to imagine him not taking the beanie off, keeping the beanie on, but metaphorically taking the beanie off and showing up to a place like this and relaxing. It doesn't look like that.
No, it does not necessarily look like that. Although I will say I'm seeing in the chat here. Is my sound too low? Am I?
You're saying it's a little low.
I bumped it up here too.
You bumped me up. All right. Yeah. I didn't fully test this before, but yeah. No, it does. This looks much swankier. This is someplace that I would actually consider hanging out at, having a drink or two. I mean, honestly, if maybe like the bubble tea thing does not appeal to me. I'm not a tea drinker. I would have potentially drank an alcohol, but actually, there really is very little that he could have offered that would have enticed me to stay. Because just the energy was really bad, and all I wanted to do was leave and call you guys from the road just to dish on everything that went down there. But I did tell you, right? Like, there's that whole wall of caricatures down at the Tim Pool compound, which is it's like drawn caricatures of Steve Bannon that he signed, of Marjorie Taylor Greene that he signed. I wonder if I have that photo, honestly. And then there's an arcade kind of like area or something like that. It's just that the image that you generated, or that AI falsely generated, is way too like adult for the Tim Pool compound. But what's up, you guys? How are you?
Hey, Emma, it's good to talk to you. Yeah, well, that's good. I had that idea. I needed to imagine
Reddit, Neverland for Redditors, right? Neverland Ranch.
A little bit. I mean, that's the thing that is just interesting. Is like I don't know why we don't have our like crap together and creating our own kind of compound where everyone seemingly lives together in a working relationship. It's probably because we have a healthy relationship with what work actually means. And we don't need like sycophants to live with us or reside and do all of our social time with. Creates a little bit of an unhealthy situation, I must say.
We don't have narcissistic personality disorder. It would be funny to all live in a compound with like R.M. Brown. And actually, speaking of which, he's been covering this. R.M. Brown, people who don't know should check out the R.M. Brown YouTube channel. Yes. But the what's the good Moon Lord? I feel like things are getting a little bit tense in the compound. I don't know.
Cabin fever.
Maybe that's
compound fever.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
Right. It's in West Virginia, right?
Yes, exactly. It is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's a rough one. If you're making people move, no offense to West Virginia or anything like that, but if you're making people move far away,
it's close to, I would say. So, like, I flew in to Dulles to get there. I mean, not to give out his assassination coordinates or anything. But, I mean, it's like 45 minutes from Dulles, so it's close to Virginia / DC, but is in West Virginia.
Yeah, people can do their own research for if they
exactly
want to do anything more. But Emma, that aside, let's get out of the man cave, sushi man cave. Well, I keep forgetting a tour sushi and Pork with the Boys, right?
Yes.
We've had this conversation before off air, but one thing that I have been sort of obsessed with is another holiday passes where I can't really enjoy the holiday because I'm mainly thinking about this horrifying genocide. I think easily have to call it collection of war crimes, ethnic cleansing, all appropriate. The words, a lot of words that can be appropriate. It ruins another holiday. Like I remember, like on Halloween, thinking like, yeah, that kind of feels weird, embracing sort of morbidity because of what's going on now. And we have this case now. I do want to enter into the record. Israel spokesperson calling South Africa friends of Hamas here because South Africa is pursuing war crimes charges. Here's the spokesperson.
Condemns South Africa's decision to play advocate for the devil and to make itself criminally complicit with the perpetrators of the October 7th.
We can't pause it like this right on here. I'm still in work mode. But okay, I'm sorry, but when you say the devil, what audience is he speaking to?
Right.
Which audience is he speaking to there? He's speaking to a Christian evangelical audience. Sorry about that.
Exactly. No, I think that's important to underline because I think there's still a game being played that I think, maybe we can retire like it's fucking Operation or something. But when people are criticizing Israel and supporters of Israel and they use the word Zionist, like I mean Mick Huckabee as much as I mean Bibi Netanyahu. Like, because guess what? Like those people are and Joe Biden for that matter. Exactly. So we're talking about the devil. Mick Huckabee loves that sort of talk. I don't know who else does around here.
You caught the sand disease. It's Mike.
With the perpetrator of the October 7 massacre. On October 7, South Africa openly aligned itself with the Hamas rapist regime when it blamed Israel for Hamas's violation of the ceasefire and covered up Hamas's crimes against humanity. It is now aiding and abetting that machinery of genocide.
I don't know how much of this we need to actually watch. A lot of this is projection, the getting in the way of investigations. No, actually, what should have happened after October 7th is international peacekeeping operation and to actually investigate those sort of things. Israel wanted to use this as an opportunity to ethnically cleanse Gaza, and they took it like that. And so we don't actually have the conditions for an actual investigation into anything like that, including not just what Hamas did, but what Israel did in response. And as it trickles out, that IDF looks to have been responsible for a large number of Israeli civilian casualties itself. So, that's where Israel's at. And I love that South Africa is leading this because Israel misses, as Irate Lump points out, Israel misses its old friend, apartheid South Africa. And I would recommend essay collection. I think Israel and Apartheid, South Africa, I think it's just called that. It's edited by Ilan Pappy. First essay is by former TMBS guest Ronnie Kasrils. And it goes who was, a leading member of the ANC and believe like even involved with the MK. I can't remember Kasrils' bio specifically, but I would look up him just straightforwardly saying, yes, actually what we're seeing is comparable and in many ways even more dire than what we were facing in the 80s. And so, and the decades leading up to that. So, that's a long way to say it's been hard to cover wacky stuff going on in Congress, hasn't it, Emma?
Yeah, David, I don't want to. I feel like I've been talking too much, so let me know if
You're the guest.
Okay, well, so it's been hard. We've talked about this off air, Matt. Just like at first, it's not about us necessarily. But we can start there, I guess, in just the sense that it's so relentless, and I guess I have like a deep kind of resentment level for like people that are able to go about their day normally or celebrate a holiday without understanding that the Holy Land, I don't believe in God, but at least it's supposedly central in the Christmas carols that, I'm listening to in the background as I open up a purse that I got for Christmas or something like that, is currently being bombed. And basically, minimum, we have 22,000 dead at this point. The presumed dead figure is 30,000. The number of maimed is also what gets to me because it gets so underreported in the number of kids that have had to have amputations without anesthesia, the maggots coming out of wounds, the premature babies. dying and decomposing, the just like quotidian humiliation in the West Bank, the stripping and humiliation of any male that's essentially presumed to be Hamas at this point, by the Israeli government, and then you have the Western press saying like, this is what Israel claims. It's just tiring at this point. But of course, it pales in comparison to anything that anybody is going through as a Palestinian American, let alone, of course, like as a Palestinian. So it's just crazy to me how right-wing thought and train of and propaganda works so similarly, even though Israel's a different country. Although, as I said earlier, I think they're trying to appeal to a Western audience. Now that they call it a genocide, I would love for that spokesperson to actually come up with some sort of factual claim as to how Hamas or Palestinian people are in any way committing genocide against Israelis. They're trying to evoke the Holocaust. And I think you often, and which is cynical, and I think Holocaust revisionism, which Netanyahu regularly engages in, by the way, by, he spread a conspiracy theory that the Palestinian Grand Mufti gave Hitler the idea to exterminate
And he's been
Jews.
saying that for years, by the way.
Totally. I mean, that's Holocaust. That's deeply, deeply dangerous Holocaust revisionism. And this is the person, these are the people leading the country. But you kind of touched on it earlier, Matt. The term genocide, there's a reticence to use it, I think, because there's like this cultural or Western association, I think, twofold with two things. One, people think of the genocide as equal to the Holocaust only. Mostly in the Western conception of what genocide is, let alone like the genocides we engaged in, like in Cambodia, or I mean, we could talk about the United States' role in genocide historically, but there have been the Armenian genocide, what is in Sudan or in the Congo, like there have been genocide is a part of human history outside of the incredibly industrialized, wide-scale, massive, horrific atrocity of the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were exterminated. There are genocides of different scales. The thing that sticks out about the Holocaust in many ways is because it's in Europe, and also of how efficient it was, not to, or not efficient, industrialized is a better word for it. So like in the Western imagination, they think of the Holocaust as this one thing, or genocide as this one thing, and as a historical event where it's only looking backwards. People read about genocides in history as opposed to when they are ongoing and happening currently. And I feel like it's deeply important in understanding our history to be able to call out crimes of genocide in the present in order to prevent them from turning into full-scale genocides of the scale that we're talking about here. So I don't fully understand the hesitancy to use that term, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, sorry, David, we've been going back, but like this is why, like on October 8th, I remember saying, like, as somebody from occupied Sioux territory, and Mandan and Hidatsa and Arikara, I am fully aware of, yes, this is actually the way that this land was taken was the exact same way that Palestinian land is taken. And it is with the extreme propagandistic focus on certain atrocities that are committed by the occupied population whose land you're trying to take, and you will use whatever media you have. Back then it was pamphlets and newspapers and telegrams. Now it's the internet, and you will use that as a way to use it as an like terrorism is not an existential threat. People knew that after 9/11. Actually, it's really our response to this, and that is the real threat. But some people don't see that as a threat. They see it as a opportunity, actually, which is exactly what Israel did with October 7th. And which is why, like, as this has developed, I still can't get over certain people saying Israel would never bomb a hospital. It's like, do you even know what y'all don't even know what you're commenting on.
I mean, that's the thing that I think has been like, I think is just really important to just highlight again and again and again, is that like what we're seeing right now with like the ridiculous statements from Netanyahu, from the Israeli government, they're not new. right? It's not like, oh, these folks have been sort of shell shocked and they're scrambling for an answer. This is just standard operating procedure for Israeli government spokespeople and how they've. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we played a video, that seemed like it was recent, of Netanyahu talking about how being investigated by the ICC was anti-Semitic. Right? That was actually from 2017, and it's just like, the point is that like this is always how they're operating and how Israel sort of communicates with the world. I mean, the hope, and I think the thing that has been, not to be too much of an optimist here because it is extremely devastating, is seeing how much people are sort of becoming aware of the way that Israel operates by being exposed to it in this way. But it's a very striking difference between the way that maybe popular like social media or independent media is covering this and the changes we're seeing there. And certainly, like if people probably spent time with family over the holiday weekend, and you probably were exposed to way more cable news than you normally consume. And just seeing, oh Lord, this is still how they're talking about this, right? Still, it's just constant coverage of October 7th as if that event has just been ongoing for 3 months. No, what has happened since then has just been a mass scale slaughter of Palestinian people in Gaza. Yeah, it's just this is something that is just deeply rooted in the way that Israel sort of operates and communicates with the rest of the world. And I think that it's absolutely critical to recognize that this is something that is just deeply rooted and not like a trauma response or stress response.
No, I mean, to your point, like even in that clip, he says he calls it what the rapist regime. Is he referring to Hamas? Like, I mean, we have to also not to trivialize the possibility of sexual violence having occurred. I think as a woman, I would never do that. That's horrific. And that happens in wartime. That's clear. But those accusations have been made by both sides. And one side gets in a high-profile New York Times piece about it. Very, oddly. I think timed, because we're talking. I mean, this is what we were doing about 3 or 4 weeks ago when we're debating about whether from the river to the sea or intifada means genocide, which obviously it does not. Like, how can we bring the conversation to a different place, whether it be backwards facing towards October 7th, and then we evoke images of very scary Arab men raping white passing women? Or can we make it about college campuses and college university presidents? And like, I think that people's media literacy about these kinds of things, let alone foreign policy media literacy and the lessons that we did or did not learn from the Iraq War, it's so much lower among liberals that normally I feel like have, or at least when it relates to Trump, will try to have a critical eye about some of these things. It is all taken at face value, and it's just like trudging through mud to get to I mean, okay, fine, the genocide or the mass slaughter of Palestinians, the at least 11,000 children that have been killed, and people will say, well, we can focus on two things at once, but can we really? Can we really? Because when we're giving equal time to a conversation about a slogan, it equates, it still bolsters this false notion that these are two sides and that this is a war as opposed to a one-sided mass slaughter.
Yeah, you can't you can't I was just going to say, Lone Wander, I feel sorry for the Palestinians, but I don't know if they should have started October 7th as they did, but I know they're desperate as the Israeli response. I mean, my thing with that is, like, first of all, they tried peaceful protest as you were and got shot like fucking prairie dogs on a hill. Yep. Yeah, so like, I think that sort of like, I don't know what they should have done.
You live in a country where like BDS has been made a legal state action.
Exactly.
Right.
It's
and
not relevant.
BDS is not even to overpraise it, right? As like a strategy, who knows if it's the best one, if it works the best. But like that is like the nonviolent strategy, like par excellence, right? It's just like straight up, we're not buying
anti-Semitic
products.
Yeah.
Having so like nonviolent resistance is not allowed. And at a certain point, it's very clear. It's just resistance is not allowed.
I'm sorry, like the truth is, well, to bring it back a little bit, flattening urban area is not justified if there are rapists in there. And in fact, attacking a concert is not justifiable just because there are people there you don't like. But it is important to emphasize that Palestinians have a right, not just morally, but under international law, to resist occupation. They do. And that can lead to violence. Now, my understanding, listening to Hamas spokespeople, and you do not have to credit their words as much as you have to credit IDF people, what they say is that their plan was to hit targets like the IDF and sort of places like that, and they achieved more success than they had bargained for, because guess what the IDF was doing? It was helping land grabs, and so
The West Bank.
and so yeah, in the West Bank. So yeah, and you know what? I think probably I would like to see war crimes on all sides looked into by an international body. The way to do that was always and is always a ceasefire, and then a forcing of both parties to adhere to international law, which Israel is foundationally opposed to, because that would involve a lot of Palestinians getting the right to return to where they are refugees from. And Israel, there's foundationally is not willing to do that. And so we can have all these conversations about, ooh, what's the Harvard plagiarisms going on, this and that. It's all designed to obscure that that's the reality that Israel is trying to impose on that part of the world right now.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it dovetails nicely with what you were saying earlier about the claims from the Israeli government that it would be disrespectful to the victims to look into the accusations of, rape and what happened on October 7th as well, which to me, I mean, we already know that the beheaded babies thing was not corroborated by any evidence. When you hear that kind of talk, like any other country that was getting coverage in the Western press, that would be met with skepticism. But we're still, and look, they've improved. I understand. Like, I do think that, like, that New York Times forensic investigation into the indiscriminate bombing of what was designated as safe zones, like, that's good stuff. That guy, Eric Toller, I think is his name, or maybe he's the Washington Post guy, I forget. But, they're better than the cable press, the print media, I guess. But it still is frustrating, too. Like, the Israeli press gets it better, even when they're not necessarily covering Palestinians in a sympathetic way. The nuts and bolts of what the actually far-right government believes in Israel, there's still this incredulity here in the United States, because it's like,
Right.
Israel's this mythical land with religious mysticism for not just Jews, but for Christian Zionists in this country. So it's like, it's like, Hogwarts. I mean, it's this, and so they don't even think of it necessarily as a place that could have someone like a Donald Trump running it, and Netanyahu's far worse than Donald Trump, and the people in his, and they're more, ideologically fascist, and terroristic, and they've been entrenched in there, as has that ideology within the Israeli public, for decades at this point. To what David was saying, like, this is, of course, not something that started on October 7th or even, a year or two before it. This is the natural culmination of a heavily militarized settler colonial project.
Yeah, and there was all this stuff when Trump was president about look at what this is doing to our credibility. No one's trusting us on the world stage anymore. And I, even at that point, like, because I mean, I was a big, Nixon history guy. It's like, and you look at Reagan people, or even Clinton people, like, no, that job is the leading liar of the world. And that's what we're seeing right now, is like all this shit about anti-aggression and even anti-genocide that we're willing to deploy when it comes to China or Russia. And again, like, I am open to expansive definitions of the term genocide as carried out by world powers. And then you turn around and you say, oh, this is just anti-terrorism. But remember October 7th and rapes. And as 20,000 plus people are dead, maybe 30, which is more than lived in my hometown when I grew up there. 50,000, which is about as much as Bismarck in North Dakota, the nearest big city to me, maimed. Not to mention everybody hungry and their lives fucked. Because guess what? Every university and a lot of mosques, those are all smithereens now. And yeah, like the thing, the press is like, I find it difficult because I think the press has always been mendacious, and I think democratization of media has helped. I think Palestinian stories, like we had a Palestinian on this program last year. We had Palestinian. I mean,
Marine
we had,
Kaki, and we
yeah,
also had Beza Adra from the West Bank on as well.
exactly. And we had callers for a Palestinian from Chicago who lived in the West Bank for 7 years call in today. That stuff is, I think, one of the reasons you are seeing movement on this with the younger people. I also know that, like, I honestly think it's getting better from a period of having gotten really bad. Like, I honestly think, like, you look at, like, even during the post 9/11 era and George Bush occasionally being like, hey, you got to chill on your response to IDF soldiers getting killed by Hamas because we just can't support you if you kill civilians in response to that. Like, that was what Israel's doing. Like, and that's the conversation that when we talk about civilians and who actually supports the killing of civilians. Well, if you take civilians out of it, Palestinians have a right to target the IDF, which is an occupying army. That is recognized by the United Nations. And for the longest time, we went through this period where I think it was, it's hard to say. I think it's just waves of bad to worse and bad to worse because, I'd like to think it was maybe a little bit better during the PLO time. But you had this thing where, like, in the 2010s or whatever, it'd be like the IDF people would get killed, and that's terrorism. It's like, that's not terrorism, actually. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it's like creating we all know this. It's creating a cycle of violence.
Well,
We're all dealing
to your
with.
point, like, and I'll open this up to David too. Like, I don't know if there could have been a worse Democratic president of the available picks who's more ideologically aligned with Israel. I think Obama would have been better on this, given his.
That's the reporting now is Biden was Israel's guy in the White House then. I mean, not that Obama.
Biden talks still, like, about his 1970 something conversation with Golda Meir as if, like, we're supposed to be moved by the fact that you're making policy based on some discussion you had 50 years ago with somebody who is was problematic already, but, like,
A racist,
a racist already. But I mean, that's the thing is like, Obama went, before he ran for state senate, he was at Palestine, photographed at Palestine events or pro-Palestine conversations. He buried all that stuff, obviously, but he had an acrimonious relationship with Netanyahu. I mean, I'm sure Netanyahu didn't like the shade of his skin to a degree, but also I just think I think he had an instinctive understanding of what this was, and Biden, as a deep believer, and we had and Peter Beinart made this point, and I just think it's so excellent. A deep believer in, like, the mythology of America being a promised land on a hostile frontier, and Biden being so obsessed with, like, the mythology of America, going back to, his speech, I guess, at the 2016 convention in favor of Hillary Clinton, when he said, "This is America, come on," and he ended it like that. He's always been an American exceptionalist, and that is exactly what I think informs his, and of course, like, that generation, it's they think of it as Holocaust reparations, but too, like, the American mysticism of it, I think he grafts that onto Israel.
But let's just be really clear here. Sorry, I just have to, because this always gets brought up. It's like, oh, for the older generation, they remember, like, the nice kibbutz version of Israel, right? This is desert land of farmers and socialists. And, like, this is golden. And this is something, by the way, I just pulled this up from Twitter. People are sharing this positively today still, right? We can forgive the Arabs for killing our children. We cannot forgive them for forcing us to kill their children. We will only have peace with the Arabs when they love their children more than they hate us. right?
Yeah,
And it's like that
hysterical
level
racist.
of, obfuscation of something that is, again, what is the fundamental problem here is that Israel has been set up as a state at the exclusion of a significant, in fact, the majority population in the region. And there is no way to put a progressive sheen on that. Lord help us all, a social sheen on that. From the get-go, when you say we are setting up a state with a certain group of people who are the ones who are going to be taken care of and who we are doing this for, necessarily you're going to be excluding the vast majority of people, and most importantly, in this case, the Palestinians. And there really is no other way that this can go other than apartheid and and pushing people out of their lands and their homes. Anyway, I wasn't saying this to contradict anything you're saying, Emma. It's just like, this kind of like bizarre thing where it's just like, oh, well, these old American liberals, they remember a better, nicer Israel, right? The left-wing version of Israel is just as bad as the right-wing one.
Yeah,
in the sense of like what the fundamental role is,
Trust me, I'm in a total agreement with you on there. I think our generation a little bit is more primed to hear that kind of argument.
Yeah. Well, I also want to touch on runner-up bum steer of the year 2023, John Fetterman. And return to a topic that got Emma and I in trouble with a large number of Majority Report audiences, because I am sick of hearing about awareness for mental health. I am interested in providing mental health with the fucking state, just like other healthcare. And I'm tired of this, all these rich kids. John Fetterman descended from slave owners, according to Greg Grandin. I think that's interesting. Anyway, he was on Meet the Press, and this interview, David knows this. I watched this whole thing sped up before because I wanted to make sure
it's not fast.
Well, I wanted to make sure I didn't do that yet. I'm sure it's good though, but I wanted to make sure he didn't say like, "Oh, actually, we should be doing Medicare for all, including mental health thing." He does not. It is 40 minutes of how brave are you, big man? How did you get the bravery to be so brave about this mental health? Mental health is good. People should do mental health. Oh, thank you. How did you determine it? How are you doing? Now, 40 minutes of this patting him on the back bullshit. And it's all this, don't be ashamed. That is not the obstacle in this country. That is an obstacle in many countries that actually provide this thing and don't price discriminate people out of it. But I don't deal with that. When I hear people saying like, I wish I could talk to somebody, or I wish I could, maybe get some kind of medication, it is the price that they're fucking concerned about. Not, right? And it's a secondary issue for me, the people that have that coverage and don't use it. And I think it's one worthy of emphasis by, say, like Ted fucking Lasso. If you control power in the United States Senate, where's the money? Okay. And so here's just to put that up there, because people misunderstand somehow where I'm coming from on this.
And that confirms to me that the choice that I made to talk about this, and even though there may be fallout on my political career, but I'm going to lean into that and have that conversation, because if I was lucky, I was grateful, and anyone that's having that conversation with themselves, they have to stop it right now and get help. And if this is the kind of the wake-up call that somebody might hear, then that's why I'm here.
In October, the Senate formed the Mental Health Caucus, a bipartisan caucus. You, of course, are a part of this group. What do you hope to accomplish?
I'm hope to expand the awareness.
Yep, that's all you need. So it's a bipartisan Senate caucus around expanding an awareness. And he's doing this as he becomes one of the more belligerent and unthinking and unreflective supporters of an ethnic cleansing halfway around the world. Fuck this guy, man. And look, like, I think we always qualified during the Oz race. Like, this guy, he's got some labor support, but there's some weird things about him. And he literally, I think, let the Israel lobby rewrite his campaign page about that policy. So this isn't a shock, but the degree to it is, I think a little bit surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very quick turn, and I think we've noted on the show that he is not up for re-election for quite a while. He has a 6-year term, and he got elected in 2022. So this is not the kind of thing where I optimistically thought, all right, he's making this pro-Israel turn for the general, essentially, and he's trying to stave off the kind of money he's seeing happen around the road from where, down the road from where he used to be the mayor in Braddock to Summer Lee in the Pittsburgh area where she was getting shellacked. And that was a bit naive, to be honest with you, because this is clearly, you alluded to this, Matt, before we went on our holiday break. The fact that you feel like this is some sort of cinema kind of turn. And this is like the exact kind of politics that someone like her tries to promote, which is something like awareness, right? Or bipartisanship around like a wet fart or something like that. And we're supposed to all clap and feel happy about that. But those kinds of terms like awareness or coming together or getting the word out there, when they come from someone in government, should really raise alarm bells, which means, like, I'm not gonna do my fucking job. Like, I'm here to be a mascot, and I'm not gonna change anything meaningful. And so, like, Fetterman sidestepped Medicare for all in the general as well. He also, of course, with the Israel stuff, those were some of the red flags at that point. But now he's kind of making a turn to not just being some sort of middle of the road Democrat, but actually somebody that might be a real obstacle to any kind of leftist progress. And for this turn of his is the exact reason people get disenchanted by politicians and by politics and don't want to engage in it. Because you just look through his Twitter history and search the word progressive. Dozens, hundreds of times. That's what he identified as. And now that he's gotten into power, he says he is not that. And so, for people who maybe have a more electoral focused political, and that was me in the past for sure, but people who are just starting to get interested in politics and see things through an electoral lens, this is the kind of thing that will get them to disengage entirely. And that's what I think is so, like, gross about this in many ways.
I mean, I'll just say two quick things. It's like, one, the fucking awareness shit. It's like, that is just such like elite politics. And it's like with politicians or just rich people, right? I mean, there's a whole cottage industry right now for like rich folks to sort of unwind and relax. And it's been a shame that like mental health.
This reminds me of like the Jonah Hill, where he's using like all of the therapy speak to basically control his girlfriend from not being a surfer girl anymore.
It also reminds me, I'm sorry, again, of Real Housewives when I watch it, and they're like, we're going to a scoliosis awareness charity, and it's just them. Like an opportunity for them to wear an outfit and go and like get some free drinks. But anyway, keep going.
No. And I also totally like, here's the thing is like, there's like actual like taking care of like mental health and these things, which should be a right for people. And it's something that is vastly neglected in this country because of cost and access for normal people to have access to those kind of things. Lord help you all if you have to deal with a real mental health crisis and you are a working class person in this country. You're just more likely to get fired than to get treatment.
Yeah,
frankly.
See ya.
So when you see these people in positions of power, doing what Fetterman is doing right now, it's disgusting if it's just like, oh, we're dealing with the stigma. Well, what stigma we're talking about here? Because the real burden, as Matt was saying, is cost, right? So this is elite politics, and it's just the way that a lot of like elites in this country use mental health discourse to be like, well, from my perspective, I think this and I feel this way, right? Which is an attempt to try to shield themselves from criticism. And I'm sorry, if you are an elected official, all the criticism that comes at Fetterman is 100% viable and valid right now. Somebody who seems to have a perverse pleasure in harassing anti-genocide advocates in this country. The other thing with Fetterman that I think is really clear, and even doing a little bit of self-criticism here, is that I think it shows exceptionally the the dangers of our movement trying to ride the coattails of other folks, right? So, like, you look at some of the other kind of, like, let's say DSA electeds in this country who we've had disagreements with and frustrations with, right? And those are, important, and we covered those on this program. You can see there's a vast difference between an AOC who gets a lot of criticism and a Fetterman who gets a lot of criticism, right? AOC is at least going to be a little, like, again, she's not lockstep. This is a criticism all the time. But Fetterman, I mean, Lord help us all. This person is in a whole other league than any of these other folks. And I think it sort of shows that, like, we can't sort of after the fact, after an election has sort of started being like, oh, this person is going to be a champion of our values. Because somebody like this very quickly has shown that they're very, very quick to turn their back on it. Fetterman, I mean, a lot of people got really excited about this guy. And, like, what we've got from him is, like, oh, don't stigmatize me for mental health. And also, like, let me dress however the fuck I want. Neither of those things are, like, at the top of the list for what we need progressive or, Lord help us, like, democratic socialist politicians to be doing.
Also a little focused on him. A little bit focused on him, which is...
yes.
That's cinema, too.
Well, that's where you're exactly. That's exactly right. And yeah, I mean, to me that's a huge red flag when someone's personal branding is coming ahead of their issues. Go ahead, Matt.
And then it becomes like, they think of themselves like they're being like they're gonna have a biography like Thomas Jefferson or whatever. Like, no one gives a fuck about you, actually. And like Christian cinema, like, I was elected here to exercise my independent, like, no, you weren't. You were elected by Democrats who wanted the balance of power on their side. But like Fetterman saying, Israelis want a senator standing with them. Like, who gives a fuck? Israelis are insane. They're like, Israelis actually, it's actually something to be said about, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders saying, like, we can't support the Bibi Netanyahu. It's like, the problem with Bibi is it's a pretty minor split. We have a wide scale problem with Israeli society, and they need to not be under any illusions that actually just this guy is our only problem with.
Can I send you something? I know that, again, this is not my show, but this is just so
got it.
pertinent. This thread here, I just saw this. Just to speak to, like, how radicalized Israeli society has become. I know we're off Fetterman and back to the only topic I think about.
That's what we're saying, yeah.
Yep. So, like, this basically was this poll that showed that, I guess it's an IDI poll, so the Israel Democracy Institute, and they asked, the U.S. is demanding Israel shift to a different phase of the war, with an emphasis on reducing the heavy bombing of densely populated areas. Should Israel agree to this demand? Only 59.1% of Israeli Jews say it should. By the way, Nate Tankus has been great on this. But if you scroll down, like, the focus of the article here is this. Main thing mainstream press is reporting from this poll is 15% of Israeli adults want Netanyahu as prime minister after the war. So Netanyahu has very little support. But the main alternatives, Gantz, Bennett, and Lapid, Gantz, Bennett, and Lapid, support the Gaza genocide. And, like, the thread goes through a list of what they support, but people can look that up, I guess. I just think that that's really notable too, because it's the just criticizing the right-wing Netanyahu government. And that's a problem with Bernie Sanders' rhetoric on this front. I understand it's more palatable to a mainstream audience. But, 80% of the Israeli population is in lockstep in full support of the massacre in Gaza. And everybody who could potentially take over for Netanyahu, I mean, Naftali Bennett just took out an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying that we need to do regime change in Iran. So, like, what are the alternatives here? You said this today, Matt. It's not going to come from inside Israeli society. I mean, the population has become, due to decades of militarization and radicalization and, like, a propaganda apparatus that, pound for pound, is the most robust in the world. And yes, I'm including, like, Russian propaganda and everything that the United States audience wrings its hands over. Like, they really have completely hermetically seal the Israeli population from the humanity of the Palestinian people. And it's going to take a Truth and Reconciliation Committee an international coalition to go in there and say, we're not fucking around here. You're a population of 9 million people. No more U.S. aid. No more of this. We're working towards some sort of solution. And that will also require, in my opinion, an actor on another actor that is not the United States or Great Britain to adequately provide a counterweight to the for the Palestinian people in this kind of discussion, because the U.S., prior to Bush, positioned itself as a neutral arbiter in this situation, and that veneer has been long gone. And it was obviously a joke before, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is like these sort of the polling about the Israelis. One shouldn't super be a shock, but also it's something to keep in mind whenever an IDF spokesperson says, "Well, look at all these Palestinians that support Hamas," and why a one group would support resistance fighters who may even have like hate in their ideology and use violence up to terrorism. Why would they support that? The answer that Sam Harris would say is to look into their holy book or something like that. And it's the same that. Like, the UN has always been actually those Palestinians should have the right to return to their villages that they were removed from. Like, some of this stuff is not actually controversial. But I think, did I just freeze? So I'll let somebody else talk.
We can hear you, but
yeah, not to us, yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's where we're at.
And like, like there's just, it's right now it's almost hard and feels a little glib even to start talking about like solutions, because the first thing that has to end is the bombing camp. I mean, we're having announcements from Israel. Oh, they're pulling back some of their forces, but we're going to have on the ground military operation in Gaza for the entire year of 2020, right? In the States, I think a lot of liberals have become fairly uncomfortable with what's happening with the Israeli government. But because, as we were sort of talking about earlier, almost all of it is sort of like Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the Trump of Israel. And if you get rid of the Trump of Israel, then, things will get better. And as you were just pointing out, Emma,
these exact conversations. Yes.
And, and no, it's just like Netanyahu continues to maintain support in the country. I mean, I think that he's probably finished because people are mad at him for the failures on the security side that led to October 7th. So if he does lose power, it's not because people are upset with the bombing campaign. It's because they think that, the prison wall should be taller and more well guarded. But, with American liberals, it's like there's nothing that the Israeli government can do at this point that will move them. I naively thought that when Netanyahu came and gave an address to Congress against Obama's orders, that might actually change some dynamics. Whew, that was wrong as hell. People were mad. There was maybe an op-ed in the Washington Post. Oh, he shouldn't have done this. But almost immediately returned to the embrace.
I just on that note, like the Pod Johns from Pod Save America and Tommy Vitor, honestly, not as bad as you'd expect on this. And I honestly think like that did have an effect. It's just like, those guys are only so powerful. Like Obama, genuine progressives. I don't know. Like if they're not working for Uber, you might have a chance.
Yeah. No. I mean, those guys. I met that guy Tommy once, and like I thought he was so nice. So I'm kind of biased in his favor. But that's just. Like generally, I think it's like the argument really does stop at Netanyahu for the most part. Damn, I had something I had on my mind, but I'm on like show number 3 at this point.
I know, and I do appreciate you.
No, I'm having a great time. You keep talking, they'll come to me.
Well, I have a question to ask you, but before that, I maybe want to paint the picture. Early on, in the bombing campaign of Gaza, we had Maureen Cockey on the program, who's a really great activist in the San Antonio area. And, a side note too, like, again, like this is a very dark and depressing time. And I don't know why I keep on falling into the role of trying to be the ever optimist on things. What gives me strength and hope has been the refusal of a lot of Americans to sit by and let this happen. I went to a march here in Austin, Texas, that was in the thousands, one of the largest pro-Palestinian demonstrations, certainly in Texas, but even in the country. And having that happen here, in the face of our right-wing government, all that stuff, like that gives you a lot of inspiration for what's next. There's been a lot of great work all across the country, but also in Texas on getting city councils, to put out statements in opposition to the bombing campaign. But going back to Marina, and just like in general, talking to Palestinian Americans, you hear all this stuff from folks like Fetterman. Well, the Israelis need a voice in American government. I mean, what message does an Israeli American get from the United States government right now when you have Joe Biden on camera denying the death tolls? When you have people in positions of power equivocating, saying end the occupation, free Palestine, saying that that's anti-Semitic. What message is that sent to them about not only the support in the government for them, but just the recognition of them as Americans too, like as equal citizens to the rest of us. I mean, it's been absolutely disgusting to watch. And Joe Biden has been the ringleader of this. And I'm curious, Emma, what your thoughts are on this about people who are operating from a position is like, I can't, back, a Biden in 2024. What we've seen right now is too devastating. The whole harm reduction strategy, when you see the context and what the actual reduction means, doesn't seem like enough for people. I'm just curious, on your thoughts, on that question.
I wish I had more coherent thoughts because, like, before this, I've said that I'm voting, for Joe Biden. I had said I'm voting for Joe Biden in New York just because, like, I'll say it on the program, and I want someone in Wisconsin or Michigan who hears what I have to say to also heed that example for the most part. And I want to live by it and vote in New York in the way that I would want my brothers and sisters in other states to vote in order to mitigate harm. But I think about this every day, like right now. Because I've never in my life had such a I had such a moral question about my vote. And I think it'll become clearer in the months to come. That's really all I have for you, to be perfectly honest, because I'm probably a little bit more lib than you guys, and that always has been my philosophy. But I'm feeling a little shaken in that, given my passion about, obviously, like the Palestinian issue, as they call it. I know that's not a great answer, but I did remember what I was going to say earlier, because if that's okay with you, Dave, if you don't mind, if I ask this question to you, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So, because I really don't know at this point. But I'm wondering what you guys think about the geopolitical strategic importance of Israel as being kind of a submerged driver for the Biden administration and for people behind the scenes and whatever we call the deep state, whatever it is. The military industrial complex, like the fact that we have this strip of land in the middle of the Middle East that's close to all of these strategic ports, to oil fields. It's essentially a de facto, like, colonial outpost for the West within within the Middle East, and how that influences things as well. Because, like, I feel like that doesn't necessarily get talked enough about, because Israel is portrayed with the mysticism of religion behind it, as opposed to like the geopolitical strategy. But I mean, before it was Israel as a country, it was a British colony, and there was a reason behind that. What is essentially your read on that as one of the more submerged factors that we're dealing with here?
I'm curious what you think on this, Max. We actually haven't talked about this too much, but I think that one thing that's really notable, that does make the steadfast support of Israel that you get in America a little retro, is that, like, before there was this kind of argument that, like, oh well, there's support for Israel in the kind of like anti-Soviet position, right? Just to prevent maybe some kind of pan-Arabism, or socialist movements maybe taking power in the region. Israel could sort of be a bulwark against that. If you look at the region, obviously Iran is a country that the United States wants to see, ended. But Saudi Arabia, the vast majority of the Gulf states are all very much moving more into the American and the European orbit. That, like, I don't know if that kind of, like, that kind of cynical realpolitik argument about Israel, like, holds as much water as it might have held in, like, the 70s and 80s and 90s.
I think you're right. I think you're right, but maybe but that was potentially, I would say, part of what created whatever the Frankenstein monster is. Now we basically have, like, if we're talking about the strategic value of, like, having access to the Suez, right? The Suez Canal. We've bought off Sisi and Egypt to such a degree that that's kind of in the bag, and that's part of also why the Rafah crossing, it's just, like, hilarious, as if people could just from Gaza can just cross all the way through, and there's no difficulty in crossing that border or whatever. It's because the Sisi is acting with the interests of the United States in mind for that reason, because of the amount of aid that we give them. But yeah, I think that it's now become, and I don't know when that point turned, a deep, like, geopolitical quandary and negative element for the United States. But I just wonder when that shifted, and what, like, when it shifted, and if that even really necessarily was, like, something that was one of the main drivers for a lot of folks before.
Yeah, I mean, John Mearsheimer, who has upset a lot of people for his Russia stuff, but also before he was pissing people off for that, which I think Mearsheimer, I don't subscribe to his political philosophy, but to say he's an academic, and he was doing work on the Israel lobby. He wrote a book called The Israel Lobby, and that goes into, like, that's definitely an argument that, like, AIPAC will make, which is you need us. You need us there. You want us on that wall. You need us on that wall, sort of thing. But as Mearsheimer and his co-writer point out, like, during the Iraq War is kind of actually a big problem. They needed Israel to really stand down. That's why you see some of George Bush being like, "Hey, chill, Israel, because you're going to make us look like we're trying to conquer the world if you start acting up, because people, like, interpret your actions in a way that they don't quite interpret ours yet." And I think Norm Finkelstein has and I can't remember what his critique of that chapter is in one of his books. So I think there's, like, open debate about that, but I think, like, whichever way you come down on it, it's contradictory, right? As you say, this is not helpful to American interests, what's going on right now. Any sort of initiative or any sort of marshalling of world opinion, we're fucked. Like, it's a complete embarrassment now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I think it's also notable that you see very different leaks coming out from the State Department, or, like, I think a shift in, like, how Lloyd Austin presents publicly about what he feels about Israel versus what Blinken and Biden do, which is, like, full on Zionism. And I think there's just, like, a recognition in the Pentagon that this is actually quite disruptive to whatever U.S. strategic interests are in the region at this point. And so it's like that at this point, like, we just come back to it. It's ideological for Biden, and that is actually quite scary.
Yeah, and back to your voting point. I mean, my thing is, and I'm not going to vote for Biden in New York, but I generally, my philosophy hasn't changed much. It's just like whichever coalitions, particularly Labor, want you to go vote for, just do that. But I also, but my main issue with the and why I say the thing about that, in addition to the I'm not voting for Biden, is, like, I also think there's a wrong message to send that, like, this is we're empowered at the ballot box to not empower a genocide heir, because America is that. And I think the best case I would make for having a democratic power now is they're not able to pretend anything otherwise. This is, I think, very educational for a lot of people to understand actually face the problem we have with Zionism in the elite parts of government, and it is a bipartisan issue. And for me, like it needs to be led by things like the UAW coming out in support of a ceasefire. Like that's a sort of or Starbucks workers even. Like I think that sort of stuff. First of all, that's going to lead to a more courageous member of Congress, whether it's like Greg Casar or whatever. Like I think like that stuff, you're not going to see any bravery over what you'd expect if it isn't led by something, both people in the streets like they've been, or these sorts of other movements standing up and saying, this is what we want in our name. And there's this guy, we need to get him on the program. I'm forgetting his name, but he's the leader of the Mail Union, and he's an anti-Zionist Jewish guy. And I need to look that up. But like
the U.S.
those
postal workers,
Diamondstein, I need to look it up.
But USPS.
Yeah, I believe it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Mark Diamondstein, he's got this piece in The Nation. As a union president, I stand with humanity and calling for a ceasefire. I lead a union that stands for equality, international solidarity. And so I don't like this. If people like decide to vote for Joe Biden because I think that is perfectly fine, because I don't think I think Noam Chomsky is fundamentally correct when he says like this conversation where it's always magnifying glass put on election day, it couldn't be more beside the point. The point is to build up these other organizations which can actually draw a stark contrast between the power structure, which is supporting mass murder right now, and point to a better future.
So just because I think it's fair, since we asked Emma and you just gave it given my kind of update here is like, I've always sort of maintained I've never been somebody who actually advocates for people to vote for the Democrat against the Republican, or the other way, of like withholding your vote, because I just don't think that there's any kind of like coherent block necessarily in this country. Like if we had an organization that held 20% of the electorate or something like that, and that's an organization we're saying we'll do lesser evil or we won't do lesser evil, then it becomes actually like politically meaningful. What we're talking about right now is like individual decisions in an unorganized political movement. And like for me, like the air and the energy and the passion and the disagreement and the breaking and the dysfunction that comes out of the argument, I find to be very boring, frankly, and not particularly helpful. Though I will say one thing that has sort of moved me particularly, recently, has just been this idea that like, if this isn't a punishing thing for Biden, I think the message that sends to the Democratic Party is devastating. Right? If Joe Biden can get away with this and they're able to sort of be like, oh well, people are still afraid, super afraid of the right wing, that people will still fall in line, that we don't actually need to move on questions of genocide. I think that's a really devastating message, both internally and most importantly for people in the rest of the world. I mean, I think something like this has to be seen as a lesson to Biden and the Democrats, that supporting something like this, allowing something like this to happen, is just a non-starter. And that's sort of where I've moved from being somebody who's sort of passive about it generally, and just sort of whatever people do, to moving maybe into a more of a strong camp of saying like, I don't think that is.
My skepticism is just that like the Democrats don't really learn any lessons anyway about anything in when they lose elections, and usually the lesson is to move more towards the right. Like Biden has some
the lesson of 2016. Sorry, Emma, but the lesson of 2016 wasn't that people were fucking sick and tired of the shitty recovery that Obama gave us. It was that they were too sexist to anoint Hillary.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And Russia or something like that. But I mean, the and although, I mean, I would say I think that there were some Democrats who weren't Clintonites that started to get it. And they had like the instincts to understand it but from a leverage point. The problem with the presidential election is that we do not have, to bring it back to your guys' point about labor, enough labor density in this country to really get elected officials on the presidential level to feel that kind of pain. I think the best avenue for me from electoral, from an electoral perspective, and getting the supporters of this genocide to feel the pain is from going at Democrats in primaries on that scale. So like I haven't decided really what I want to do in New York, because I do think about things like abortion. I think about Trump saying he wants to come in and do the Insurrection Act on day one. And I know that my vote won't really matter in New York, but it's like about how I want to weigh those opportunities to like between two options that are going to be the only options available to me, and lead in that way. So that's really my perspective on it when I talk it through. But if it were to happen today, I genuinely don't know what I would do based on that. But we're gonna have to I think there will be some things that shift. Like we talked about on the show today, but Trump being so invisible for the past few months and not doing any of the debates has really helped him, because people forget what it was like, and what it was like to have him be the president for that period of time and the chaos that engendered.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, the calculation, unfortunately, the cynical one that Biden is making when it comes to the support of Israel.
I mean, that's the Democrats' only play right now. It's sort of like look at the right, and the thing
And
that I think is really helpful. I mean, and abortion too, for sure. But I'll say the thing that really is helpful is when you look internationally on this too, is this is actually just the strategy for the center left across the board, all across the globe, is the same thing. It's like, look how crazy the right is. We're going to maintain our certain kind of status quo things. I mean, this is what happened in Argentina recently. This is over and over and over. It's just like, if we can point to the right and say how bad they are, that's going to be a winning strategy. And look, some elections, 2020, that worked. There's no doubt about it, right? 2016, it did, right? So it's not like a foolproof political strategy. And again, like for me, I will just say, like, on an interpersonal level, I'm not really worked up about what other people feel is right or wrong to do. I will say, as organizational level, I think UAW not endorsing Biden is something that I very much support. The DSA continuing to not support Biden, and just for the record, because everyone always gets confused about this, DSA never endorsed Biden or any of these folks. In any of these elections, I think, and media operations too, I think, should be a little careful about endorsing something like this. Again, at the end of the day, whatever people do is going to be an individual decision, because no one is voting in any kind of real coherent block at this point. That I think that you can really spend a lot of words and burn a lot of friendships over this in a way that is not particularly helpful. But for me, more and more, and again, it's the opposite of y'all in New York, but in Texas, it's the same kind of thing. The result is, and Cornel West, somebody who I have a tremendous amounts of respect for, who might be the person who I end up voting for, that wouldn't even be a vote in the sense of thinking that was going to do anything either. And I think that this is the thing that makes nobody happy, right? Because people who are sort of, you have to vote for the Democrat, or else you're basically supporting the right wing, or get mad at you. And then like the people who are like, well, our vote is our opportunity to express ourselves politically, get mad when I say I don't really think it matters. But that's sort of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, well, and I can predict my mission is going to be the same. If Trump wins or if Biden wins. If Trump wins, it's, yeah, motherfucker, don't support a genocide if you want to, and do actually something on student loan usury if you want to turn out those voting blocks. If Biden wins, it's, well, on balance, like labor supports you, and also the other people aren't any better shakes on Israel, and so like the message is just still the same, and because like ultimately we're not authoring the outcome in any real sense anyway, because we don't have that coalition.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I always will say that I think voting is about like a piece of strategy, and it's about how you want to strategically express yourself. If you choose to, you're in a blue state, or if you feel like your vote is not necessarily going to translate. I understand that. I'm still in the like a little bit of a harm reduction mode, but like that's where we differ a little bit slightly, I'm sure. But I'm
I
also
would just say
crashing right now, so I might have to say goodbye to you guys.
no,
Well,
that sounds good.
That's great, Emma. I just want to pitch one more thing to you. Is this a better man cave? You said you like Tommy Vitor. Is this a better man cave?
For me, I
man.
mean, first of all, I need to know where you like what AI generator you're using with this.
This is Dolly. Yeah.
Did you pay for it?
I did. Yeah.
You did. For just
I have to be able to know. I'll be honest. This is I've only used it a few times. I used it because I wanted to get hold on, I'll make myself appear here. I wanted to I wanted to see what train tracks going into a swamp in Minnesota looked like, and it did not give me very good results, I gotta say. But I need to.
It's so dense. This is what they said about like why when the Star Wars prequels came out, and that's like what the big selling point was how dense the imagery was, and there's so much going on in every.
That's a bad sign.
Yeah, that's how I feel about your AI imagery.
All right. Well, Emma Vigeland, thank you so much. She's also the proprietor of Emma Sports Vigeland. Don't try to talk to her about basketball while football season's going on, though, because she won't hear it. But
hey.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Wait. So there was a game played yesterday, though.
You want to break my heart again?
No. Oh wait, that wasn't actually gloating. Although I will say, so I bet Texas money line, and then when they were up, I just was like, they're getting outplayed, and I cashed out. So I still made money on it.
Well, I'm glad. No, that was definitely. I mean, I'm not a bettor, but I definitely like earlier in the first quarter, I was like, oh Lord, we have no answer.
I will say I had $10 in there, and I was like, I don't want to go to zero, so I'm taking like a 2 or 3 week break. And then I came back, and I'm up with my little bets. I'm at 140. I'm really rolling.
You might appreciate this, Emma. I had like a little bit of a family emergency, so I had to fly out of the state. So I was traveling yesterday, which very out of character for me to ever be in a difficult situation. Watch a Texas game, especially one like that. So I was flying during the game, and I'm watching it on the plane, and literally the plane lands when Texas was attempting the onside kick.
Yeah.
So the kick goes in, and I see Washington recover, and literally the plane landed, so the Wi-Fi and everything collapsed. And I was like, all right, it's game over. And I'm just like, I'm walking through the airport, just sort of devastated, sort of rationalizing what just happened. And I look up at the goddamn television, and Texas has the ball on the 15-yard line with like 4 throws. And I watched every single one of those, after already sort of accepting the loss.
Yeah.
With this, it was tough, but I'm proud of them,
I'll say though, well, I was really trolling Matt there just because the Knicks actually beat his Timberwolves yesterday in the matinee. But Michael Penix, like you guys lost to, he's my guy now. I'm lefty quarterback, big rocket arm, Giants picking at number 5. Let's go.
Oh,
that's what I want. All right.
Well, what's very exciting is the Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl this year. So.
Oh yeah, it's your year. It's your year for sure. Mike McCarthy, he knows what he's doing down there.
Emma, thank you so much.
Yeah, seriously, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
See ya. Well, thanks, Emma. She stayed for much longer than I'd asked her for, so I really appreciate it.
I
do. Late at work.
I do appreciate that. It's always great chatting with the great Emma Vigeland. Folks, we're going to go to the post game where we got some fun clips. We'll be taking a couple of voicemails and questions from the audience. So you join us over there at patreon.com/leftreckoning. Before we jump over, Matt, you got something interesting on your shirt here. You might want to tell people about. Get one.
Folks, we got the Left Reckoning Fence Cutters Land is for the People not t-shirt. This is a very warm sweatshirt. So if you, like me, have difficulty staying cold in the place that you live because you don't actually control the heat and it's very drafty, I recommend it. It is I'm a fan of warm clothing. It's very nice and comfortable. You don't even need a blanket when you're out lounging on the couch with this thing on. So what's the leftreckoning.com/store?
leftreckoning.com/store. And it's not just that hoodie. We got our Great Plains t-shirt, our classic Left Reckoning what do you call it? Arms on it. Tank top. I will say, we get, and also if you have them, You know, tag us in pictures. We love to share those. We got a fellow who's been wearing their Left Reckoning cap so much it was completely destroyed.
Love that.
You know, so we love seeing it being out there
Hey,
in use, folks.
buy several at the same time.
Yes, you got to protect yourself and your investment. But really, it does help us continue to do the show. We're really looking up forward to 2024. We've got some incredible guests coming up in January. I can't wait to announce some of them very soon with all of y'all. It's not over though. Patreon.com/LeftReckon to get access to the post game. You also get the Sunday bonus episode. I'm back on Thursdays with the Griscom Q&A stream every week. So come and visit us there. Do appreciate everyone hanging out with us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, folks. And yeah, we will see you in the post game in about 15 minutes.
About 15 minutes. Patreon.com/LeftReckon. Keep hanging out.